So my name is Linda Seabrook, and I am Senior Counsel for Racial Justice and Equity in the Office of the Assistant Attorney General and the Office of Justice Programs. I want to talk a little bit about my position. It's a first of its kind position, and it was conceived by Assistant Attorney General Amy Solomon to help OJP connect and map to communities that have been disproportionately impacted by crime, violence, and victimization, to provide a pathway to those communities, to those organizations serving those communities, to contribute to OJP programming, inform grant making and investments in community safety and justice, and to reduce barriers and increase access to funding and support. Because I think you've seen a theme, right, in all the conversations that we've been having so far. Every community deserves safety, every community deserves justice, and those working within those communities that have suffered from historic underinvestment and sometimes even active divestment deserve to be leading the solutions that impact their communities and deserve more equitable access to the funding and resources to allow them to do so and drive those solutions. So OJP has engaged in a multi-pronged strategy which was informed by organizations that are working within disproportionately impacted communities to reduce and remove those barriers and provide the training and technical assistance and support to facilitate success and sustainability, most importantly, for those community-led solutions. So one of the spokes of this multi-pronged strategy is the intermediary funding model. And when we think of intermediary funding or an intermediary funder, we might just think of such organizations as pass-throughs, right? That they are just to get the money from OJP or the federal funder to the boots on the ground organizations. And yes, that is obviously what they do. But to me, the more important piece of what they do and the intermediary's role that is so deeply impactful is their training and technical assistance that they provide to the subawardees that they support. They are building and reinforcing the infrastructure of these organizations. They are supporting and advising on organizational strategy, sustainability, professional development for their workers, and so much more. And that's why we're having this discussion today, and to learn from these pioneer intermediaries of the CVIPI program, the OGs, and to hear their strategies and approach, what they've learned, and what we need to know, right? And what's next in their estimation. So without further delay, I'm going to turn to our panelists, distinguished panelists, amazing panelists, and ask that they introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their organization. And I'm going to start with my friend Wendy.
I don't know if that's a good thing. What is it? What time of day is it? Afternoon? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wendy Talley, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, where we advance equity in funding. So I'm in the right place. And we also concerned about community well-being. And so we do this through our mission, and we look for folks. We find, fund, inform, and feature organizations that are underfunded in communities of color. That's what we exist to do. I also would be remiss if I don't tell you that I'm the granddaughter of Odessa Hart, because you always got to bring your ancestors up into the mix. And I am the daughter of Marie Allen. I'm also the mother of Matthew Talley. He's a 30-year-old Black man who I am always committed to keeping alive. And so this work that I do is personal. And also getting resources into the hands of people who are most qualified is what I'm up to. And so, yeah, it's a little bit about me and what I'm up to.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining our session today. My name is Carmela Miles. I work for not Chicago, I work for Metropolitan Family Services, a division for Metropolitan Peace Initiatives, a division of Metropolitan Family Services, which is one of the largest nonprofits in Chicago that has been around sustaining for 165 years. I'm so grateful to say that because we're doing some really amazing work throughout the city. And a little bit more about the Metropolitan Peace Initiatives. We are a grant administrator, a TA provider, and we provide supportive services for our convener of Communities Partnering for Peace. You'll hear me mention CP4P throughout, and that's what we do and who we serve, which is made up of 13 hyperlocal CBOs serving in 28 communities throughout the city of Chicago. And why I do this work, I always want to make an impact. I always want to make sure that I leave a mark no matter where I am. And I get to serve in one of the most amazing communities in which I grew up in and wanted to be a part of and see the change and the growth, and to leave Chicago for several years and come back to still be in that same community to provide support, change, passion, courage, and hope in that same community that looks different from when I grew up in. So just wanted to make sure I make an impact.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is LeVar Michael, Senior Program Officer with the Local Initiative Support Corporation. We are the nation's largest community development finance institution. And if you don't know what a CDFI is, don't feel bad because most people don't. We serve as an intermediary to pass through funding to community development corporations and other types of community-based organizations nationwide. Last year, we distributed roughly $2 billion in grant funding and loans to different community-based organizations and CDCs throughout the country. Our main objective in the work that we do is really to uplift communities. We always say that at the end of the day, our mission is to create sustainable communities of opportunities for the residents that we serve. And everything that we do is through that lens of really being cognizant of the fact that community residents and community stakeholders are the ones who should determine what their communities look like. And we help do our part in providing the resources for those partners to be able to achieve that goal. Why do I do this work? Well, I probably would say, I grew up like many young Black males in a community that was riddled with community violence. So community violence isn't new to me. This is something that has impacted my life professionally and, personally. And I always wanted to do something to try to make a change and try to address those issues, especially around community safety. For me, that was becoming a community organizer, which is how I started my career. And, without really thinking much about it, it eventually led to me being more involved in public safety work. And that was just as a result of being responsive to what the community that I was serving at the time wanted to see. So yeah, in short, that's pretty much what got me involved in this work.
I also forgot to share that I'm a program officer for
You forgot your title, huh?
for two of the three intermediaries that we service.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So we have the right folks at this table. So LeVar, I'm going to just continue with you to just set the stage for us, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain the role of an intermediary organization and why that strategy is so important for this particular initiative of CVI?
Yeah. So, well, first, before we get started, I just want to, mention just how grateful I am, and I'm sure many of the recipients of this grant funding, just how appreciative folks are for the fact that DOJ listened to the advocates, in the field, who for many years advocated for additional funding around capacity building. When we talk about capacity building, we're really talking about building equity, right? This is really about addressing historic issues that have existed in our society for some time, right? And that issue that I'm talking about is money going to a subset of organizations and leaving a whole additional subset of organizations out of the mix when it comes to the flow of funding. And that's not just related to community violence intervention, that's related to public safety initiatives across the board. So, having DOJ really listen to the advocates in the community that were, pointing this issue out for a number of years, it's just a great thing. And I think that a lot of folks are appreciative of where we've gotten up to this point, but there's still a lot of work to be done. The role of an intermediary, as many of you know, is to distribute the grant funding that comes down through DOJ to the community-based organizations who are doing this work. One thing that we all know, for certain, is that when you look across the board at the community-based organizations, conducting community violence intervention work, the organizations that do that work the best happen to be small grassroots organizations. These are the organizations that have the capacity, the capability to go out into communities, build relationships. These are the organizations that throughout the years have established trust with the communities that they serve. So it's a no-brainer that these same organizations should be in that pipeline of funding when it comes to public safety initiatives like community violence intervention. So as an intermediary, first and foremost is for, our purpose is to get that money directly to those community-based organizations who we know do this work very well. But secondly, it's also about supporting those organizations, supporting them by focusing on, their organizational capabilities, their administrative capabilities, making sure that they have a firm back office support built into their organization, making sure that they have a board of directors that is supportive of their mission as an organization, and just doing all that we can to really provide that TTA that can take these organizations to the next level. So it's not just about, simply, distributing funding to organizations. It's really about helping to cultivate that second generation of organizations that can access federal funds. And at the end of the day, that's really what our goal is.
Right, right. And I'm just gonna have you drill down a little bit, right? So then what was LISC's approach, right? To building this capacity, building that network, supporting those organizations?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we started from that premise, that understanding that these small community-based organizations are the ones that do this work the best. So when we started the process of really looking at, putting out requests for proposals, we wanted to make sure that we built our application process out in a certain way where we could identify just those types of organizations. We wanted to ensure that we weren't, focusing our attention on mid-size community-based organizations, or even, small to mid-size community-based organizations, but really focusing on those community groups that may not even have a brick and mortar, office, who function probably with just a handful of staff. So we really were cognizant about building out our application to be able to identify those organizations from the start. The second thing that we did was to convene experts and practitioners across the field to make sure that we were listening to them. So we conducted listening sessions to find out, hey, what are you seeing out there in the field when it comes to capacity issues with community-based organizations? And then we use that information to sort of inform our, next step of how we were going to further build out this initiative. And we landed on, focusing on 3 specific areas. One, as I mentioned earlier, was the organizational capability of the organization. Again, do they have a board of directors? What does their staffing leadership look like? Do they have specific positions designated to looking at fiscal management? We also then looked at the administrative functions of those organizations. So what type of processes do they have in place to be good stewards of grant funding? Do they have some type of software or systems for tracking expenses, et cetera? All the stuff that you would think of that's needed of a community-based organization, administering a grant. Those are all the components that we really needed to take a look at to, determine what their current capabilities were. And then the last piece was to focus on programmatic performance as it relates to their CVI initiative. So if they were implementing a specific CVI approach or model, we wanted to ensure that they were implementing those models correctly, right? And if they weren't, then we could bring in additional resources to assist them with that. So I could go on, but for for the sake of time, I'll just,
Yeah, oh, I'm going to follow up with Wendy on that. So, from our conversation, when we were talking about this panel, I know that you all took a similar approach, right? That needs assessment approach. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the challenges that you may have encountered, right? Or if you want to follow up on what LeVar said first, that's great. But also, yeah, you can. I know you can walk and chew gum at the same time. So, but I'm going to tee up that we want to talk to about the challenges and how you've addressed those challenges.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit before we moved on that the intermediary is a bridge. And that the role of the intermediary is to be able to have a communication with those systems and places that are giving the money and also with community. And so being able to translate and elevate the voice of community like nothing about us without us, and elevating the voice of community to the systems that are giving the money is a role that an intermediary can play. And that's part of our feature, part of our organization. So I just wanted to uplift that. I also wanted to uplift, before we move on, there's a whole lot to do to get ready for a grant. You just don't, need a board of directors and all of these things. There's a lot entailed with getting ready for a grant. So we physically at the Latino Coalition took the time to do what we call get ready events, where if you were just interested in hearing about what this opportunity could be for you in the local coffee shops, in the community rec centers, in the libraries, inviting folks in so that they can hear about the opportunity. And once you said that you were interested, we called you on the phone. How you doing with that budget? How you doing with that narrative? And so there's this partnership. We call the people that we fund community partners. And so I just really think that getting ready for a grant is almost as important as the application. Because one of the things an intermediary does is they also start asking you about your organization. They start asking you questions about your reporting. They start asking you questions. So you may not want people asking you business like that. I'm just saying. But the way that we approach building the relationship is such that there's mutual trust.
Right. Meeting them where they are.
And we meet folks where they are. So anyway, I just wanted to put those two things in. I love the idea of the small community-based organizations, because you said they had a couple staff. Sometimes they have one staff member and they in their car, working out of their office in their car. So, but those are the kinds of folks who are close to the solutions.
That's right.
And so we need to start thinking about what is the value of funding people who are close to the solutions, and stop already thinking that they can't do it. The back of the house stuff that we do, the infrastructure stuff building that we do, we can do that. But there, you cannot replicate the relationships that folks have in communities. You cannot replicate that. So we can teach folks how to make sure that their invoices are aligned with the receipts. We could teach that, or we could hire somebody to do that. But the kinds of relationships that I see are just so imperative. So some of the challenges facing. So first of all, we are a community-facing intermediary. So it's not just a pass-through. It's not just like we get the money and give the money out. We are also interested in how do we help people who are looking at complex issues that are facing our community. You talked about nuance earlier. I was like, oh my God, that is what's happening. This is a nuanced conversation on how we're going to provide healing and support of community. And so it's very important that we not just see ourselves as a pass-through, that we see ourselves as supporting the infrastructure and making sure we make deep investments. Our average grant size is around $150,000 because it takes that much to have a staff member, the lights on, place to stay, all those things. So I'm not saying it's bad to give $5,000. I'm just saying that if we are going to deeply invest in communities that are doing this work, that our investments need to be deeper. Also, it's important to be able to get folks to the point where they can have access to federal dollars. They can have access to private dollars. And so we do that by making sure we build a strong backbone. And so I believe that that's one of the ways that we address it. We definitely look at meeting people where they are. I have had the experience of bringing on 10 new community partners in the last year and a half. That was a lot, y'all. That was a lot of work to do. And I got to witness the profound work that they do, but also help them and support them with some of the challenges, like submitting an invoice and getting it rejected. What are the stories that exist around Black and brown people with money?
What?
And so I started really having a conversation about, hey, what story do we need to dismantle?
Right.
How can we dismantle those stories and author our own stories around our ability to do both, to serve our community, but also be good stewards of the resources. And I think it's important that we are bridges and not gatekeepers. So as an intermediary, I think it's really important for us to be able to make sure that we don't hold on to the money because that really does impact controlling people's self-determination. And so if I really wanted to ensure that we empower them, I want to build that muscle. I want their muscles to be built so that they can compete for funding and manage the resources and be good stewards of the resources.
Perfect.
That's good.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add really quickly to what Wendy was saying or sharing about challenges. One of the biggest challenges that we've seen across is hiring. This is very unique work, right? And so hiring and getting our organizations ready for the boots on the ground work. And so I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that we've seen amongst our organizations is making sure that they can hire and retain quality talent that can actually get the work done, because this work is different. It doesn't look like the regular 9 to 5, put your suit on job. It's very, different, intense, it's different hours. And so it's also very hard work, y'all. And so that was one of the things that we discussed as far as a challenge. And one of the organizations that we work with, we have an initiative called Flip Workers. And so they got 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the streets. And so that was also a way that one of the organizations used to hire to see like how ready they are, how willing they are, and are they really ready to make a change to do this work for real. And so in the beginning, we talk about getting this funding and giving it to them, but we don't think through the things that they need to do to make sure that they're ready to spend this money down. And so getting to that point, making sure that, hey, you have this job description, you need these people. You just can't go out and say, hey, I'm looking for a boots on the ground worker, right? Outreach workers. So that looks different. And so making sure that the organizations have the resources that they need, that the networks and the partnerships and the collaborations within the communities are built in order to make this work. And so a few of our organizations didn't have staff for the first 3 months of the grant. And so just going back to talk through those things and what that looked like in order for them to be successful in their spend downs and their budget revisions and all the technical assistance that go into providing support for these organizations. So I just wanted to add that to Wendy's
Absolutely.
And
remarks.
you know, Carmela, that's a wonderful segue. Because we can go from hiring to retention, right? Because this is difficult work.
Absolutely.
It is difficult work. And I know that Metropolitan Peace Initiatives, right, has kind of as a focal point of their capacity building, focusing on like self-care, right, and wellness for CVI organizations
Absolutely.
and the professionals, right? So why is that so important? And then what are some of the strategies that MPI uses?
Self-care is so important because this work is so unique. It's heavy work, it's not easy work. It's after hours, it's responding to calls and shootings at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It's being on call for 5 or 6 days if it's a hot spot, or if it, you know, we're in highest risk needs of communities that needs reduction in violence. And so it's not easy work. And so one of the things that we incorporate, we have a MPA, which is our Metropolitan Peace Academy, that trains outreach workers to professionalize the work that they're doing in the communities. And so we call them, we professionalize in the work. And so we make sure that they feel like professionals in the work, but also too, how to take care of themselves doing this work. And so we just recently opened our site. Some of you all will be there tomorrow evening to see this beautiful site that we have. And so, and throughout the site, it's so much intentionality and detail that went into making sure that the site felt like home, felt like peace, felt like the work that we need to do, a safe space. And so you will see the themes throughout. But one of the things that we push is making sure somebody is intentional about their self-care, preserving who they are, because if you preserve you, you can preserve your family, and then you can preserve your community.
Right.
So it goes beyond just you. And so that's what we do. And so we've created some initiatives around financial literacy for our outreach workers, yoga. We have a wellness center that they can come and work out and get their bodies in shape. And we do challenges monthly so that they're eating properly. And not just them, right? This is open for everyone that we serve. And so we have a mediation training room, a peace room there. So we have mediation classes. They happen once a week. So meditation classes that you can come take weekly. And the new initiative that we have is this train a trainer, where you can become a professional personal trainer in health to train other people, but it's also giving them jobs. It's also a workforce initiative attached to that as well. So those are some of the initiatives that we're doing for self-care. And then just making sure that some other strategies that we use going into the internal health.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tee up because I knew that was coming. Our goal is to make sure every organization we touch is audit ready, right? And so LeVar and Wendy did a really great job at sharing the things that go into the work, but also to making sure that they're audit ready in all aspects. And so what makes us unique is our cluster approach. Every organization that we serve, they get 6 touches a month, right? And so I'm a program officer, so I get calls, texts, emails, all day, problem solving with the organization. I look at myself as a thought partner. I'm here to help you. You got these great ideas, this community work. I'm here to help make your work smoother and make the process greater, right? And so with those 6 touches, we have behavioral health. So they have behavioral health. They offer group sessions to those communities and organizations. And then if a shooting just took place yesterday, we was at a meeting. And so our behavioral health team was right there on the spot to go do a circle training with the organization that lost a staff person. And so this is actually happening, right? So that's one thing. They have a legal aid liaison. They have a staff accounting that's assigned to them. They have a data analysis person that's assigned to them. So we do data training and that data analysis. And then we have monthly check-ins. So all this is happening monthly simultaneously. So that's what makes us unique and how we approach it. The support piece. Usually you get a grant, here you go, here's the deliverables, figure it out, you spend this money or you lose it, and you're stuck. So we want to see the work continue, so we make sure we ensure that the organizations that we serve have that support in multiple areas, and so they get 6 touches a month, and that's what really makes us unique. And so it helps them meet deliverables, and if they're not meeting deliverables, what's the growth plan? If you have vacancies, do we have a hiring plan in place? Let's talk through that. Can we create some strategies? So those are things that I go in and do and work with the communities in which I serve to help bridge the gap. Also, too, we also have an admin checklist. to make sure you have a 501c3, simple things that you have in place, the board of directors, the things that you all talk through. So they have to have all of these things in place every year. So that way, no matter if they're receiving funding from us or outside sources, they're prepared to continue to apply for money. And I just wanted to share this piece. All of the partners that we work with, budgets have doubled. So we were looking at private
Wow.
funding, and now we're into public funding. So
right,
all
all
of the
right.
budgets have doubled. So, and that means multiple dollars, but also multiple communities are being served and touched every day. And so that's how we continue to keep this work, and those are some of our strategies.
Oh, amazing. And I love the way you frame that about like audit ready, right? Especially because, you know, some of the things that Wendy was talking about those myths, right, that we have to confront and combat. And that's a good segue. Carmela, you're good. You're like setting this up. Thank you. It's a good segue over. And Wendy, I'm going to say you took my, at OJP, I say this all, nothing about us without us, right?
Yeah.
Communities know what they need. Let us lead the solutions, right? But I'm going to forgive you for taking that. from
Okay,
me.
thank you. I appreciate it.
But building off what Carmela was talking about, I'm going to pivot. And so many of the CVI organizations that are working 24/7, 365, right, are what are sometimes known as culturally specific organizations, by for FUBU, right? So, you know, in other words, right, that the staff themselves are credible cultural community messengers. So what are some ways that the Latino Coalition leverages cultural touch points to build the capacity of CVI organizations?
Cultural touch points.
Well, sorry. You know, I had to get a little fancy.
So we thought of that. There are indigenous practices from our communities that we need to just elevate, that we need to bring up that can promote healing. And so one of the things that I really noticed is like the first orientation meeting that we had for our community partners, I brought in Aztec dancers that opened up a ritual space, and then we like lit a candle together for the work that we were up to. And this is before we talked about technical assistance. I also do drumming. So there's opportunities for us to bring in some African drum into the mix. I watched our community partners pray together. I also start my meetings off with, how are you doing? So I'm usually the only woman in the group, y'all. And so I hand out these little cards, like called mindful cards, and they like, no one's ever asked me these questions. So just getting people to start thinking about themselves as a person in this work, you know, and what's going on with you. And so that has been a really significant part. And what we've also learned is collaboration is something that we need to be intentional about. That there are histories in our communities of not working together, organizations not working together, leaders not working together. And so we took that to heart. And so before I started most of the technical assistance, I talked about having a sovereign collaboration. What are we gonna say makes us work together? And so I do think that spending time on building relationship is actually pivotal to our success. And taking the time to deal with breakdown in relationship is worth our time. And so we have been spending the first year building, getting in relationship. Our community partners talked about how important it was to get together frequently. They like seeing each other. And so it's almost kind of like now they're like a fam, right? But that took time. And I think trust is another thing that people talk about in building relationships. And I've been saying that if building trust is based on people not making mistakes, then we have a trap. People will make mistakes. The figure is, do we have the grace and the compassion to be able to allow the space for them to make mistakes? And so that's what we're working on with our community partners is how do we have the grace and space for them to make mistakes and still build relationship. And I think that those are some of the cultural things that I've been paying attention to, that possibly is allowing our community partners to build.
And be more vulnerable, I would think, right?
And there's they're gonna do activities together, y'all. This is unprecedented. They're planning like activities together where they're gonna bring youth from all different communities together. And so like they have evolved without us. They are evolving as a group. And so I really think it's important for us to spend the time to build that with who we're working with.
I love that. I love that. So, LeVar, I'm going to turn to you. Data is so important, right? But it's sometimes hard to make that case, right? So my dad used to always say, when I would say, "Dad, did you know?" And he would say, "Girl, you know the difference between storytelling and telling a story, right?" So can you talk about, a lot of these organizations haven't been the subject of academic research, right? They don't maybe understand or appreciate that they have the time and the capacity themselves, right, to actually do data collection and even analysis, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how you make that case to a CVI organization about the importance of data, that they have the capacity to do this, right? And what are some ways that LISC also supports that capacity building?
So, I mean, when it comes to, so this is such a critical piece, as we all know, to community violence intervention. For so many years, I've done this work for a number of years. And it always amazes me when you have conversations with CVI practitioners and you ask them, hey, tell me about, the clientele that you serve. Well, we serve, individuals who are connected to, gun violence. We're serving the most at-risk individuals that are out here. And then you say, okay, show me, that you're truly serving this population. And it's kind of like, oh, yeah.
That part.
It's a little hard then for them to articulate exactly what tools they're using to determine that they're serving the right population. And I think in this field, this is something that plagues the field, just a lack of understanding around how to utilize data to identify the right individuals to serve. We all know as CVI practitioners that the point of this work is to identify those high-risk individuals and get them the services and support that they need. So that's one subset, right? It's utilizing data to determine, where you need to pivot as an organization. Do you need to take a different approach to the work that you're doing with the community? Do you need to, take another look at the clientele that, the referrals that you're getting from some of your partner organizations within the community? So that's one side of the box, is looking at like how data informs decision-making. But then on the other side, there's also, when you're talking about building the capacity of these community-based organizations to be able to access funding on their own eventually, not just federal funding, but also local and state funding as well. These organizations have to be able to show that they're having an impact, that their work is actually impactful. If you can't make that case to a funder, no matter whether it's a philanthropic funder, whether it's a federal application, your proposal you're crafting, if you can't make the case that your work is impactful, unfortunately, you're going to have a hard time obtaining funding for your work, right? So one of the things that we do early in the outset of our, partnership with organizations is have that conversation, right? Educating folks on the importance of one, utilizing data, like I said, to, determine decision-making within your organization, but also being able to tell your story effectively, being able to communicate to folks that this work is truly impactful and that these organizations are truly making a difference within their communities. One of the things that we did recently at LISC was really try to think outside the box as to, how could we, lift this side of the house up, right? The data analytics side for these organizations. So one of the things we did is reached out to an organization, which we all know because we have their products in our wallets, MasterCard. MasterCard, when it comes to money, you can better believe that they're not going to get data and analytics wrong when it comes to money, right? We will always have perfect analytics when it comes to, to spending or anything else that involves money. So the same type of technology that they use for their partner financial institutions to determine, what things are looking like in commerce, right? That same type of approach we have applied to community-based violence intervention programs. So being able to use their test and learn software that they utilize for different financial institutions and different corporations that they work with, they're now using that same analytic power to be able to assist small community-based organizations in building out their data analytics performance, right? So we finished that pilot with 2 organizations, and the impact has been phenomenal.
Wow.
Being able to identify, temporal analysis that this organization, the work that they're doing through their CVI work, looking at spatial analysis, being able to determine when street outreach workers are on the street, being able to directly show reduction in community violence when folks are on their shift. And when the shift is over and folks aren't on the street, being able to show increases in community violence when that happens. So that is profound, right? That's a big win for those organizations to be able to go into a boardroom, to be able to go to a funder and say, look, we have in-depth analytics that can show that the work that we're doing is extremely impactful. So that's one of the sort of innovative things that we brought to the table through the work that we're doing, really trying to build that partnership with a private corporation and community-based organizations. But yeah, at the end of the day, again, data analytics is such a big piece to CVI work. And it's something that I think also you have to meet people where they are. Not everyone has Palantir or some kind of, very in-depth, sophisticated software to be able to do this work. And you really don't need that, right? There are small steps that you can take as a small community-based organization to build your way up to being able to have a really impactful analysis and data analytics process. So it's just about meeting people where they are and slowly working up to that point.
Go ahead, Wendy.
I just wanted to add in that the Latino Coalition comes with those back of the house systems already. So when I'm working with a community partner, I already have a data system that they could work with, that they could just say, how can we customize that data system? I also have financial platforms where they can submit. And so coming with those things and taking that burden off of them, and then they outgrow us, right? Like they might need more sophisticated systems, but we at least start with a system that everyone can use, where they can pull data from, and they own it.
And it's accessible,
Yes.
right? So going back to LeVar and MasterCard, I love that because we're leveraging a partnership, right? So that's going to bring us to, I'm going to pivot a little bit. This will be our last question because I know that we probably have questions in the audience, and then you know, depending on that, we might come back to the last one that we had planned on talking about. But, you know, the saying is, it takes a village, right? In addressing the ecosystem of violence is not done by one type of organization. Can you discuss, and this is for everybody, the importance of partners in this work, and how, and I know that Carmela, right, that MPI really works on expanding partnership opportunities. So let's start with you, Carmela, and then we'll have everybody else chime in.
So we have a motto at the MPA: those who do the work lead the work. And so that's the heart of partnership for us. We can't do this work without relationship. It's relational. Partnerships is at the forefront of everything. And so a large part, even in our role, we facilitate introductions to eliminate silos within the work. Sorry, hope you can hear me. We facilitate introductions to eliminate silos within the work, because, you know, sometimes you're like, I'm doing this, I'm serving this community, I got this group of people, and so not opening up, so that facilitation of partnership helps us out. But some ways that we facilitate partnership, we have an area coordination call that happens bi-weekly, and so who sits on those calls? It's a citywide call, so CPD, the Chicago Police Department, sits on those calls, the Park District sits on those calls, Chicago Public Schools sits on those calls, local CBO sits on those calls, and so it helps us to share out and build community within that call, but also build support. So, like, an example on one of the area coordination calls, it was a speed hump, no speed humps. The streets were, CBO got on the call and said that somebody was speeding through the streets. And so the city was on the call and said, hey, we can get somebody out and get some speed humps put out by next week. And so those are the importance of those calls, because so many different partners sits on those calls to help. We also have outreach calls twice a week. And so that brings the South and West Side outreach workers together, which is also a build safe community, but also helps us keep a pulse on trends that's happening throughout the city and have support to eliminate what's happening in whatever community it is. So those calls happen twice a week. And then we have our CP4P calls that happen bi-weekly as well, to keep a pulse on those trends and support. And so for me, I think I even lead with the partnership piece coming into this work and going into, is like, how do I fit in? Who do I speak to? Where can I sit? And so it's something as simple as, hey, can I help you put that tablecloth on? Can I help you make sure that the food is set up? But also sharing too, I just think about going into a room full of men and they're looking at me like, this little lady coming in here telling us what to do. But also like, oh, she worked downtown, she pushing paper. And I'm like, no, I'm from the hood, what's up? I'm about to do this work with you, so let's roll up our sleeves and get it done together. And so being able to have those relational conversations and being able to connect in that community setting, it really helps. And so I think that's the partnerships is the heart of this work, and it makes the work so much easier. And it also is breaking down those silos and helping us all come together to commit to completing the work.
And getting those immediate solutions. I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Who wants to go next? Wendy, why don't you go? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, it doesn't. Oh, no, I'll be super quick. Yeah, partnership is extremely important. I think when it comes to this particular field of CVI, I think it's important to also take a step back and help folks understand what partnerships look like in the CVI field versus other types of public safety initiatives, because it's different, right? The thing that people also have to be cognizant of is know what your ask is. If you're, looking to develop a partnership with someone, don't just have a generic ask of having someone at the table for the sake of having them at the table. I think we've all been involved in partnerships or, part of a task force or coalition, and you sit there for a while and you're, after you're there for a couple meetings, you look to the person to your right or left and you're like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why my organization's here. That tells you there's some kind of breakdown there, right? Someone wasn't being strategic and thoughtful about developing that partnership. So it's really about sharing information with our organizations that we work with to really get them to understand how to enhance strategic partnerships, right? And partnerships should be about leveraging additional resources, filling in gaps. If a partner has some type of talent or some type of capabilities that you don't have as a CVI organization, how can you partner with that individual or organization to shore up those gaps that you have within your organization? So again, it's about like being really strategic. And again, understanding that difference between just a typical come to meetings and report out partnership versus a partnership where you're really delivering tangible results and you're offering up, something of benefit to the organization.
All right.
All right, so the Latino Coalition funds in the areas of reentry, victims of crime, and violence interruption. And in communities of color, that touches everybody. And so what I've noticed is that the systems are set up for you to fit in one of those categories. When you're a Black or brown person, you might hit all of those. You might have caused harm, you might have been harmed. And so the system isn't set up for that intersectionality. And so what I see missing is that piece. And so being able to bring all those folks together in one room, they were able to, like you said, expand what was possible. They're all in the same communities. And so they were like, oh, I could serve the mom, you could serve the son, and then the auntie can come. Like this is kind of an eclectic ecosystem that I see is very important for serving communities of color, because what's missing is the silos aren't working, y'all. The silos and me fitting here and you fitting there are not working. And so I do foster all of those community partners. So in the portfolio that I work on, I have about 15 community partners, and I bring them all together. And I bring them all together around healing, what you said, the self-care stuff. I bring them together on trends. I bring them together on how do we address complex issues in the community. And so that collective mindset, I think, is really great. And then also bringing in other partners to be thought partners, not to tell community what to do, but how could you help me think about this? And so we just had a partnership starting with the university hospital campus. And it was so funny, the researchers came to meet with the community partners, and they were like, well, we could have told you that. And so we had to go through talking, how do we create that this relationship is of value? Because the community folks were like, hey, we already know that if you have liquor stores and you do this, this is what's gonna happen. So I think that the researchers and community coming together could be very, very fruitful. And so that's what we're working on next.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're trying to do that too, right? I think funding streams are in silos, right? As we know, right?
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that's so wonderful about the CVIPI program is that, OVC has a role, right? Office for Victims of Crime has a role. Of course, it's BJA's program, juvenile justice and delinquency prevention, right? Because we can't, address this issue in a vacuum and in a silo. So I love that. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A because we have about 10 minutes left. Would just ask if anybody has a question, if you could just, okay. One of our lovely Vanna White type people, or Oprah, or however you want to do it, are going to come around and offer you the mic. So go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you guys so much for this panel discussion. I am from Rapid City, South Dakota. I work for city government, and I actually have two questions. One is, how do you mitigate the issue of the reimbursement-based model of federal and city funding? Sometimes it takes up to 45 days for the invoice to make its way through the city system. And even still then the federal system is, and a lot of these organizations are new and don't have that upfront investment, those dollars upfront to actually invest in the systems that it takes to operate on that reimbursement-based model? And then my other question is, because I work for city government, how do you avoid the king-making risk, right? For every one organization you fund and support, there's probably 4 or 5 others that also are doing good work, but maybe aren't at the right capacity level, or you know what I mean? They aren't sort of as visible as the one that ends up getting that funding. So how do we call it the crab bucket syndrome in Rapid City, where somebody's elevated because of the funding they get, but then face all this criticism by others who maybe aren't getting the same type of funding and visibility. Thank you.
I can take the first half. And then hire an intermediary. The first half of the question is, we really did look at that. So we do advances, 1/12 of the grant amount as an advance to the community organization. And so that gets you startup costs covered. That gets you being able to hire staff, gets you equipment. So we do that. We also have been able to influence the state of Colorado to do the same. So because we were the first ones in, we were working with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, but we also are working with the Colorado Department of Public Safety, and they watched us. And so as state organizations watching us, they saw that we were still able to not have anybody abscond with any money, and we were able to be audit ready. And so the concerns about not being able to get the money back have been eliminated. And so now it's becoming a part of the state process. And so I think that we as funders must look at things differently also. So what was the original reason why we didn't want to do that? And we might need to reconsider. If we're going to work and fund deeply in community, we have to change some of the way that we function.
Be more nimble.
Yeah, and that's such a good question, because that's one of the first things that you run into.
Yes.
When you're working with organizations, these small grassroots organizations. One of the things that we did early in the process was to help the organizations identify additional sources of revenue. And a lot of this, well, not all of it, but some of it was non-discretionary funding. So it's extremely flexible, right? So these organizations were able to utilize some of that funding to help, shore things up. The other thing that we did was change some of our internal processes. So instead of individuals, submitting their financial requests or their reimbursement requests on a quarterly basis, for those organizations that had, a bit of a tougher cash flow, we were able to make sure we were doing that on a monthly basis. It's more time consuming, it's more work for us. But at the end of the day, it's helping to get money to them, more effectively and efficiently. And to the second part of your question, I don't know if we'll ever get past that, right? In society, there's always going to be this, conflict that exists between, certain community-based organizations. And unfortunately, it's due to a lot of our policies and practices as a country. We've sort of created this friction that exists there, right? When you starve resources from certain organizations for a long period of time, and then you drop in periodic, buckets of money here and there, there's going to be squabbles, there's going to be jealousy, there's going to be, infighting. So I think that's something that we have to look at as a society, to say, we need to stop the disinvestment and we need to invest more so we don't create those situations. But in the meantime, we have to work with partners to get them to understand the importance of being cognizant of that kind of stuff, those dynamics, right? And helping people work together better. But yeah, that's a major issue.
Okay, she's coming right now.
First, thank y'all for your excellent information and the advice you provided during this session. But I had a question around technical writing. Being one of those one-man organizations when I first started, I recently just got, funding to hire a team. One of the biggest issues outside of grant writing that I had was the technical writing and being able to report out the impact. How do intermediaries provide technical support? Or does that look like training when it comes to smaller orgs?
So for us, we offer, we offer trainings, a series of trainings. So we have the academy, but outside of the academy, we do monthly trainings on things that we ask our organizations, what do they need support and what do they need training with? And so we reach out and facilitate those trainings. If it's in-house, we'll reach out to somebody that's in-house. If not, reach out to other organizations that can facilitate training. So it may be a 3-day training on technical writing. If 6 organizations are saying the same thing, whatever that trend is, we make sure we dispel it by offering whatever services it is, whether it's finance, data, technical writing, whatever those things are, that's what we do, provide technical assistance for what's needed to enhance the organization.
And we do the same. We have a 12-module training, which is called the Community Justice Accelerator Training. We bring in a number of different subject matter experts. Some of those modules are, on grant writing, what have you. But the other thing, so that's one thing that we do is provide enhanced training for our organizations. The other thing is to really utilize the expertise of subject matter experts. If we're working with the organization and someone lifts that up through their assessment process, that, that's a gap within their organization, we will assign a subject matter expert to work directly with their organization over a period of time to help shore that up for them. So it's sort of training, but then also set it in subject matter experts as well.
Great. So we have time for one last question. I see you already have the mic.
Hi, my name is Anissa Evans. I work for the city of Syracuse in the mayor's office to reduce gun violence. And we also noticed silos. So one of our goals in our office was to bring the silos to that table. In this work, what I've been finding is that because they've been working in silos and they've been receiving funding from private organizations, the private organizations don't have as strict of reporting. So then when we're asking for stuff, they're offended. And I'm trying to figure out, I see both aspects of it because I've been working in government pretty much my entire career. So how I actually ended up into this role is because I was working for a boots on the ground grassroots organization, and they would come back. I was taking meeting minutes for the board, and the reports that he was giving me, I'm like, that really just sounds like a government process, and I don't think that they recognize that. So I said, do you mind if I insert myself and go to these meetings with the city that I already work for? And he said, sure. So I go to the meetings, and I came back to the board meeting, and I'm like, yeah, it's really a misunderstanding of what they're looking for. And so the more I've worked with them, the more I'm realizing that no matter how much we explain things, they see the hurdles and barriers, and now I've become the enemy. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I best support all of our CBOs and let them know, like, I am here as your partner. I am not here to trip you up. That bridge, I am your bridge. Like, please allow me to help you. How do I get them to not be offended and actually listen to what I'm saying?
It's almost like therapy.
Right.
The first word that came from me was mindset, right? Like, what is a growth mindset? The mindset that they're sharing with you is a mindset that's not going to help them grow. And so I think I talk to people about what are mindsets that get you to that dream that you have, and what are mindsets that get in the way. And and there are barriers when you have a mindset that's not growth. And so I guess maybe just, I can meet with you after, but I just think that designing something where people are honest with each other, because we did that. I just said, look, y'all don't play well together. Let's get it out on the table. So I think it was like James Baldwin who talked about, like, we can't change something we don't face. And so we have to face the fact that this is in the room, and they'll bring it to every single meeting. So from the beginning, I was like, let's dispel this, let's get it out on the table. And so I guess not being afraid of facing it and having everybody own it and get them off, site together, get them to meet, like whatever you got to do, but they have to face it. Or else the work is not going to move forward in the way that we all dream of.
I would also too say the community aspect. So not meeting them in those spaces. That space doesn't facilitate an open dialogue or open discussion for me to say, hey, here's my books, right? So another approach we have Lynn events that's lighting the night. So those are community-based events. And so what I do too is to build community. I go in those spaces. Sometimes the CEO is there, the supervisor is there, the boots on the ground person is there. Like everybody knows who I am when I come in that room because I've built those spaces, and so much to the point where they like, what you do? I want to know what you do, because when people come in the room, they like moving to see what it is that you do. And so, but those are in those community spaces where those intimate conversations happen. So then when I'm behind a computer screen or when I'm in their office saying, hey, open your books, or how can we be holding you accountable so there is growth, that relationship has already have been fostered. And so I think building those relationships in those unorthodox spaces, so when you're in those spaces that they know who you are and they're looking for you at that point, like, hey, I need what you got, can you help me?
Yeah.
So, and that, I mean, at that point, they are looking for you. That relationship and that partnership piece is being built, but being strategic about where you're meeting them at will open up the lines of communication, letting them know that you're helping them. Because in those spaces, it's everybody trying to get what they're trying to get out of that space. It's not suitable for an open dialogue or a partnership connection. So in that space, it's like, she the enemy, she just trying to be nosy. Instead of saying, hey, she really is here to support, right? So that's my advice.
Go ahead, LeVar.
Oh, just
Yeah.
add
Take us
something
home. Take us
really,
home.
really quick. So, as a person who also worked in local government for a number of years, shout out Baltimore City, Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, which no longer exists, but is now MOTSI. But anyways, we had the same situation, right? And we dealt with the same type of issues when you had some folks that required, rigorous reporting, typically in government, and then the private sector or philanthropy that really didn't, right? And that's a good thing. But I think also one of the things that we tried to work on, at least during the time that I was in government, is how can we expedite processes?
Yes.
How can we, take out some of the red tape that existed? How can we sort of streamline things just to make it a little bit easier, right? Reporting is essential, and you have to have that. It's a component, and helping to educate people on that, is a process, as both of my colleagues here mentioned. However, I think there's some things that could be done in the public sector as well to sort of, get rid of some of these stringent requirements that just aren't like realistic and aren't beneficial overall. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Great, thank you. If you can all join me in thanking our OGs of the CVIPI Intermediaries organizations. Really, 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 Wendy, Carmela, LeVar, thank you.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.